You're listening to the Holistic Spaces podcast, brought to you by Mindful Design Feng Shui School. Episode 94, Why Feng Shui? Welcome to episode 94 of the Holistic Spaces podcast, where we hope to inspire, educate, and empower you to create your own holistic spaces that nurture and resonate with you. Laura Morris and Anjie Cho are the founders of Mindful Design Feng Shui School. We teach and provide guidance on how to shift your energy and revitalize your living spaces with the ancient practice of Feng Shui. Mindful Design School offers Feng Shui courses and certifications. Check us out at mindfuldesignschool.com. And right now, we're open for enrollment for our current certification session, which starts at the end of September. So it's pretty exciting. We have a lot of people signed up, but we still have some openings for a few more. If you're interested in that, we have free info sessions that we do throughout September. If you visit mindfuldesigntraining.com, or you just visit our website and there's something up on there, right, Laura?
Yep. Yeah. You can click through. There's a whole page all about our certification program. It breaks it down in detail. All the modules, but definitely sign up for an info session. We do them all live so that people can interact with us, because everything when we teach, we teach on live online. So it's important for us to, when we talk about the program, to keep that consistent. So yeah, everything, whenever we do these info sessions, they're not recorded. So you can ask questions, which is really good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And we're really good at them because we've done them like dozens of times now. Okay, so because we're gearing up for our own little back to school with the certification program, Laura and I thought we would talk about what brought us to Feng Shui. So that's why we titled this episode "Why Feng Shui." So Laura, you're gonna start. Why? Let us know. Tell us your story. What brought you to Feng Shui, and why Feng Shui?
Well, why Feng Shui? That's a big question. So, Feng Shui it was really hot. I feel like it was like the late 80s, early 90s. It was super popular, and I think everybody had a Feng Shui book somewhere in their house at some point. And I know I first encountered it during that, and I was really curious about it then. And I kind of dabbled with it and played around with it, but never really read books. And at the time, I don't want to say there was no internet, because that makes me sound super old, but there was not all these articles online. So, I think I had like one or two books, and I would play around with it. And my path in life. So where I was is I spent a lot of my time in corporate. I was a marketing director. So I did a lot. It had like nothing to do with Feng Shui. It was very business focused, like all the time business focused, and budgets and marketing plans and ad campaigns and stuff. So it was a really great outlet. And I was always interested in design because I'm an artist as well, and I've been painting since forever. So eventually I ended up leaving my corporate job crazily and just letting it all go. And I decided to practice, to do my design business, because I was already doing it for friends and family. And I thought and then started getting on word of mouth. And then I was like doing it all the time. And so I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. So I started my own business, left the corporate world. But always in the back of my mind, I was always playing around with Feng Shui, the idea of it, the beauty of spaces, the feel of spaces. And I think, I don't know, maybe a lot of people out there can resonate with this. This makes sense to them, especially if you do design. You don't even have to do design, but maybe there's something about creating a space and making sure it feels a certain way, and just walking into a space and knowing that there's just a couple things off and working with that. And I think I didn't know at the time, probably, but that really is a lot of the heart of what this practice is about, is to really be aware of what's happening in a space, although I didn't know it yet. And then I had my design business, and I was doing well. I liked doing it. I enjoyed it. I had great clients. I enjoyed it. Um, it was the project management part of it was chaotic, but it was still, that's part of the business. And I started to do yoga. So I had a child, and life, when you have a kid, things just kind of, perspectives change. And I thought once, I kind of got out of the crazy young years, I thought, okay, I'm going to really focus on myself. I want to, make a real shift. And so I started practicing yoga, and I got really like intense into it enough that I ended up doing my teacher training. So I actually ended up becoming a yoga instructor. And so I was still doing design. I was a yoga instructor, but then something just clicked in terms of working with energy and yoga and meditating and doing this energy work in yoga. I felt, wait a minute, this feels like there's a connection here. It feels like there's something like I can join the two together. So again, I knew about Feng Shui, been dipping my toe in it here and there, but I thought, you know what, why don't you, Laura, just find a program, somewhere you can go, do a program, see what you think, and, start. So there was a program in where I was in Canada. There was one that I did. And I to be honest, I didn't research it that much, but also there was the availability. I wanted to do one in a certain time, and worked with my schedule. So I ended up doing this one, and really all it did was I had more questions. Like at the end, I was like, oh my gosh. And it was not very long program. And to be honest, it was just enough to make me dangerous, as I said. So I started to integrate it into my practice, my design business a little bit, but I really felt there was more to it. And so I ended up realizing that actually there's different perspectives, there's different ways to practice it. So I started researching it, and then I found the school that you and I did, Anjie. And that is when I realized at that point, when you say why Feng Shui, part of the power of Feng Shui is finding the right teacher, right? So when I started talking to people, emailing people, one of them was Rosalie, and I'm in Canada. It's in Toronto, and this program was in New York, and it was a big deal for me as a Canadian to travel all the time to do the program, and the distance, etc. But when I spoke to Rosalie and I learned about the program, and then I started looking a little bit more into the practice of Black Sect, specifically Feng Shui, for me, that just clicked. And so part of it is the practice itself, but Rosalie, really connecting with a teacher. And I really liked her, and I really liked what she had to say. And then basically the rest is history. So I went into the program, I did that, and then we met because you were ahead of me, though. You were a year ahead of me, I think.
Yeah, I think I was a couple years ahead of you, but that doesn't mean I'm a couple years older than you.
No, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, actually my story is similar especially in terms of Rosalie. So if you guys don't know, she's been on the podcast before. Rosalie Prinzivalli is one of our mentors, and she we're very proud and delighted that our teachers are involved with our program too. They're not involved in the certification program, but they're a part of the continuing education that we offer to our graduates. But we love Rosalie, and I always tell this story, but Rosalie actually officiated my wedding, and so she was truly the first mentor that I really had, and also the same with Barry and Stephen and Catherine. So so my story, let's see, what brought me to Feng Shui? Why Feng Shui?
Why Feng Shui for you?
Yeah, why Feng Shui? Well, I always I'd studied in design, in architecture, and I was working as an architectural designer, but it was just like did not make my heart sing. I was really unhappy, and at some point things came to a head went and I took a trip to Thailand, and I randomly received a Reiki healing session, and that was very transformative for me. And I came back to New York, and I realized I needed to change everything, that things were not working. So I started to study meditation and practice yoga, but then there was a gap. Like, what about like what I do for a living? What about like the thing that I do for over like 50% of the day, right? And how does that connect? So um, I decided to start studying Feng Shui as well. And so I kind of dabbled in it, like maybe like a lot of the listeners here, took a class here and there, got some books. But I'm more of an experiential learner, um, and also what I learned later is that you can only really get so much from books,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, and I didn't even really read any books, honestly. Like even our students now, sometimes the ones that we have now they ask me, so are you reading this from a book? Or what books can we read to learn this? I said, I didn't learn any of this from a book. I learned all of this by being present with my teachers. um, I said, here's some books, but I honestly haven't read any of them. So I may use them as reference guides, but I've never like really read a Feng Shui book from beginning to end. And everything I know is from experience and watching my teachers. And we spent a lot of time with our teachers. So um, even I remember first meeting Laura. It was at a class consultation, and she was saying something, and we were with Rosalie, and I was like, I'm like, she's someone that knows what she's talking about, because some people didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, we were both grads. I think we went back and audited, because you could do that, right? You could join any of the consultations they were doing. That's right.
Yes, yeah. So so anyway, I just dabbled in Feng Shui for a long time, and I always wanted to take the certification program, but just things weren't aligned. So in 2009, I got laid off from my job, and we were in a recession. So there was no way to get another job, even if I tried, and I did try, but I realized, look, I'm going to take advantage of this time and study Feng Shui and do this 3-year certification program that I've always wanted to do. So I enrolled, and immediately, like, things started changing even before I took my first class. Like, Rosalie always jokes that I was like the student that had clients before I even took a class.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, and she was always such a support. I said, well, this person wants to hire me for design and Feng Shui. And she's like, do it, I'll help you. So I did, and that was my first client. And I also got my architect's license, and other projects started falling into my lap. And so it really changed my life, Feng Shui. I didn't know anything about it, and I'm not really a shop-arounder. So usually for me, it's pretty obvious, because something will feel very clearly the right path for me, and things will kind of open up, and I'll have lots of like energetic arrows pointing at it. So I'm like, okay, this is the right time. I mean, there are some times where I don't know what to do, obviously, but with Feng Shui and with my career, I'm pretty fortunate that a lot of the obstacles seem to really they jumped out of the way when I started studying Feng Shui. As soon as I opened myself up to that, a lot of just opportunities they just keep presenting themselves. So it really changed my life and my career. And I never thought well, there was no such thing as podcasts when we were young, but I never thought I'd be on a podcast or writing a book or teaching students. Like, I never had any of these aspirations, but but the universe has other ideas for me. So, but it's very, I'm very grateful, and I grow every day with all of the learning and all the teaching and all of the gifts that we receive from this practice. And it's really the ground of everything we do. So yeah, so that's kind of my story, and it really changed our lives and our careers. And so, Loris, do you
I was going to ask you something.
Yeah,
Well, okay. So you said, everything, arrows pointing and things sort of unfolded for you. But do you think, you're probably a really good manifester, right? Which is one thing. But isn't it kind of a chicken and the egg thing? Like, you're a really good manifester because you embrace this practice, and this practice is about really looking and seeing and being aware and making, like, then you have things that come in front of you. But sometimes if you're not open, you can't see them, and you don't see that it's perhaps an opportunity, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think that because you mentioned this, I think the main difference was that we had teachers that were invested, and true teachers, that they cared about us individually. And this is what we do with our students. We try to get to know our students all individually. And so that made the difference, where I was able to, yes, like, be instructed with some guidance and gentleness to be able to be open to this.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because in Feng Shui, I think it's just kind of built into
your microphone.
I know, sorry. It's just kind of skillfully built into the teachings. Like, they really layered it in such a way that you slowly learn. And this is actually, because it's an ancient practice, that's a lifetime practice. And we learned over 3 years and longer. I mean, like, we still study with our teachers, and there's always so much more to learn, even though you hear the same thing over again.
Yeah, it's not like you're necessarily learning like ground shakingly new things every time, but sometimes you'll hear the same thing, maybe a few months later, and the same meditation, the same mantra, or the same adjustment, whatever that had been taught. And there's a lot about this practice that is right place, right time, right? And I think the professor said that, it really, then you open your eyes and you're like, oh my gosh, now I get that. Okay, now I can use it. And now, there's a lot of that. So there is an element of time, and, which is part of the reason why we have the community, right? As you're saying, our continuing education, where we bring our teachers on and we talk. And so, because it really is like once you can have all the knowledge, you can learn all of this stuff, and then, but it's really, there's really a process of how it slowly starts to emerge as being, as clicking for you, right? And that isn't just about learning more and piling it on. It's really about letting what you've learned plant seeds. Yeah. And then down the road, it's like, oh my goodness, that's going, tink, and like a bell goes off, right?
Yeah. And to what you said too, yes, I'm pretty good at manifesting career oriented things. But it is a chicken and the egg type of thing. Like, it's because I did the work. And also, it's in Feng Shui, we have a way of looking at things. Like, there's a lot of different elements. There's your fate, your astrology, what you're born with, how much work you put in, the education that you do, the Feng Shui, your environment. All of these factors affect you. And I remember reading something that maybe Joey Yap wrote, and he wrote, like, why is it, someone asked him, like, why is it that every Feng Shui consultant isn't super rich? And he said something along the lines that because you can be a great Feng Shui consultant but not have the fate to become a super wealthy person, but still have the fate to be very skilled at that practice. So it's about finding your voice, and not necessarily your vocal voice, but finding where you fit in and what your strengths are and what you want to work on, and what makes your heart sing, so you can really show up. And so for some people it's doing a lot less and not being as not manifesting a million things like you or I, so people have different ways.
Yeah. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be about, if you come from a place or a job or a situation in life where you're just not happy, who cares? Like, I mean, this is what we talk about. The particular area of the Bagua Shen is not necessarily all about money. It's about abundance and blessings. And so you come from a place where there's a poverty in there, in your happiness, that when you come to this practice, if you've decided to come to this practice to make, I don't know, make your career better, to make your life better, whatever it is, there are degrees of that. I mean, depending on where you came from. And that's what you're saying, those 5 factors,
Mm-hmm.
when you put in the work and you use, so the first, you can't really change your destiny, where you're born, your cosmos, that kind of stuff. But, by working really hard, and also by shifting your environment, and that's where the Feng Shui comes in, you can really smooth out the edges of stuff that isn't really going your way, let's just say, or you've been dealt a bad lot in life, let's just say. You can use those, the pull up your bootstraps kind of approach, right? Which a lot of us may or may not have. And, entrepreneurs seem to have that because that's sort of how they're wired. And then there's the Feng Shui of it, which is the art to, okay, what is happening in your environment and how can you clear the path so that, because you've been dealt this situation, how can you shift that, and using Feng Shui? So it's just like, it's one part of a mix, as you were saying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So one thing I thought we could also talk about in this episode is a specific a specific way that Feng Shui either changed your life or a client's life.
Okay. Well, clients' lives, I've had a bunch of different successes. I think, from getting pregnant, which is a big one that I did. That was one that was a big deal. And that you have to tread very carefully with when you're working with clients in that area. But we had kind of worked together for quite some time, and she and I knew each other. And so we were ready for, that's sort of, it was a long sort of term thing that we were working toward in her house. The other was I had a client that ended up going to Cannes Film Festival. They manifested that, which was really big for them. But I have to say, overall, I mean, those all sound sexy and really cool. And everyone wants to know about these success stories, and yeah, they're there. But for me, what I love is, so I have clients, let's say, that come to me thinking, okay, so my background's design, and so sometimes people don't truly understand what the practice is, and they come and they say, okay, well, I think I need something needs to change. And I don't know what it is, but something needs to change. And I think it's my house. I think there's something going on in my house, like the furniture, like, I don't know, I need a new sofa, or my sofa's in the way, or something really mundane that they think is the big thing. And then you're like, okay, sure, we can look at that and we can talk about that. Because again, you want to meet people where they are. But through that meetings and through our meetings and our coming together as clients, there's such a big shift once they understand the practice and they gain more of an understanding, and their eyes are open to some of the other things that, every client is different and introduce different things depending on where they are. But there's a transformation, and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this was what it's about. And then there's this sort of, they want more and they want more. And then you're kind of, okay, well, let's start with this. But it's that shift from, oh, I thought it was going to be this, but now I see that it's so much bigger than that. And there's so many other things that are like, so many patterns and things that we can work on that are deeper than that. And that's, for me, that I really love that when people that I work with, the penny, like, they get it, the penny really drops through seeing the practice and understanding, and having to go open it up for them in a way that is that they can come to it on their own, if that makes any sense, without kind of throwing it at them. No,
that makes sense. And that reminds me of when I started studying in university. When I started studying architecture, everyone, like, as a stereotypical comment, would say, oh, you're studying architecture, so you design buildings. And then one person said, oh, that's so cool, you're studying architecture because you're working with people's spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with a lot of things in life, once you really dive deep, whether you're a nurse or a teacher, a school teacher, or a Feng Shui consultant, or a taxi driver, whatever it is that you do, you can, there's a superficial way of looking at it, like, oh, I just drive taxis. Or I read something recently where this taxi driver said that he loves driving taxis in New York City because his favorite ride is bringing people from the airport that have just moved to New York.
Mm.
And they talk about like how exciting it is, and he always takes like the 59th Street Bridge so they could see like the skyline coming in. So I think with whatever you do, there can be a lot of meaning and depth to it. And so same with Feng Shui, people may think, oh, what color should I put up on the wall? And then they're surprised when we say, well, what is it that you want to work on? Like a friend recently, I gave her a yantra and she was like, where should I put this? I said, well, what do you want to work on? She's like, I don't understand. I said, well, do you want to work on more on like your joy, or do you want to work on your health, or do you know what's most pressing? She's like, okay, but I don't understand how this has to do with like putting up this piece of art. And so I said, don't worry, just tell me and then I can direct you. So people so I think it's just a beautiful thing that when you dive deeper into different things, there's much more to learn.
Yeah. And it's that idea of sometimes you meet different people along the path and you work with different clients. You can't presuppose that people have this kind of, they're open to this. So it's interesting, like, for example, when you said that, using intention to put something rather than just putting it and hanging it where it's, oh, well, I have a space here, so I'm going to put it here. And actually thinking and using intention is such a big part of the practice that just teaching clients that they can sit back and start to become aware of their space and how meaningful it can be. And you don't even have to do these big, crazy cures. You could just spend time doing that. For some, that is that's a big shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a success story. Like when they start to see their home as having the potential to support them because they've really taken the time to look at it and to place things properly, or with intention.
Yeah. And there can be like the dark side of that where suddenly people are totally afraid to do anything in case it might be bad. So it's really an interesting paradox where it's important to have intention, but also important to not go overboard.
Yeah. And there's a difference between just hanging something. It's not going to do anything wrong. You just hang it there. It's just going to be hung there, and it's not going to do anything good or bad because you didn't have any intention behind it. But as soon as you bring that in, that's where you can, that's where it ends up shifting. Right. So, if some people come to us and go, oh my gosh, my wall is red here and it was red when I came or whatever, or I have a red thing here. Is that going to mean that this? No, because no, it's just there. Sometimes things are just there until you actually set the intention, make sure and officially sort of create it as a feng shui adjustment. It's, it's just a wall. It's just a piece. It's just a chair. It's just a this, it's just a that. So.
Yeah. But it also goes back to that thing where the students asked me about books. It's like, well, there, like Laura always says, there's no formula to this. So sometimes it might not be so good. Like maybe you did put a piece of art up and then a consultant comes in and says, well, actually, this art may symbolize something that's happening with you unconsciously, or it could mean nothing, but it's not something that you can read a formula in a book about. So that's where a skilled practitioner really helps. And I think most people understand that if you look at what you do, whether you're a mother, whether you're a college student, whether you're like a doctor, a nurse, whatever, like the nuances of what you're doing. So anyway, I wanted to give one interesting thing that happened on a class consultation. So a few times a year, Laura and I offer class consultations where you can get a one-on-one feng shui consultation with us, actually 1 on 10, I guess. It's like it's a one-on-one consultation, but it is audited by students and it's recorded, but it's at a reduced rate. So it's a tool for us to teach our students, and it's super I think it's probably where people get the most learning done.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I got the most learning done. Like, so when even if our teachers were still teaching, I would still be going to their consultations and auditing them. So I went to dozens and dozens, because luckily I live in New York City, and that's where they were all happening. Anyway, so I recently did one, and we're not going to tell you the details, but there was an adjustment I gave at the very end after we had ended, basically. But I just had the inspiration to give her one more suggestion, one more feng shui adjustment that had to do with buying flowers for herself. And then she got very emotional, started crying, and then told us that very much resonated with her, and shared her story about that, and what kind of emotions and thoughts and feelings and healing was evoked by that. And then the next day she sent me an email. Someone had randomly, anonymously left her fresh flowers on her front door. So it was very odd but strange. And also, I'm not taking responsibility for that, obviously, and I don't know who did that, but and it wasn't like I did any magic. It was really each client that we work with, it's on them, and it's not, feng shui is not a magic pill, but it's on you to be open, like Laura was talking about earlier. When you're open to seeing things differently, then you can be surprised by what can arise. Mm-hmm. But each person, including our students, all have to take responsibility for themselves. We're all adults here.
Yes.
Unless you're not an adult listening to this podcast.
Which would be weird.
Okay, well, so I guess we can wrap up. Mm-hmm. Thanks for listening to our stories about why
feng shui.
Yeah, why feng shui. So we'll do more of these. I think it's nice to share our stories. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Holistic Spaces podcast. Tune in the second and fourth Mondays of every month for a new podcast episode. If you like our podcast and this episode, please share it with others, subscribe, and you can even leave a review. If you'd like to explore the world of holistic spaces and feng shui on an even deeper level, you can visit our website, online store, blog for more information about feng shui and holistic living. You can also support the podcast by checking out our certification and mini courses. We have a practical feng shui course once a month at mindfuldesignschool.com. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.